good afternoon to everybody that's on the East Coast here in the United States. It's 3:15 p.m. on Friday, and good morning to our guests this afternoon, Swapan Paul, and thank you very much for getting up early in your morning, because I think it's 5 o'clock in Australia right now. Is that correct?
Thank you, Roy. Yes, indeed, it's early morning on a Saturday, but it's fine with me. I'm an early person.
So thank you for getting up 5 o'clock on a Saturday morning. That's correct, yes?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. So I just want to give a brief introduction about you and your background before I start with some of the questions that I wanted to have as a basis for our discussion today. You are a water and wetland scientist, aquatic ecologist, an educator, and a nature conservation champion with nearly 4 decades of combined experience gained in Australia and overseas. You've done research and management of urban water and wetlands, monitoring and management of freshwater and estuarine ecosystems for protection of conservation of nature and biodiversity. You have a long list of other things that you're involved with. I work with you currently with SWS for was working with you before I had to resign my position for my other volunteer efforts that I do with SWS. You and I had worked together with the Education Outreach Committee. So I am familiar with you and have worked successfully with you before. And to that end, we're both volunteers. And of course, SWS and our colleagues in wetland science appreciates our efforts as volunteers. So we're volunteering our time today. And I have some questions that I wanted to ask you. The intent of these wetland interviews are to inspire others, perhaps now studying or thinking about studying wetland science. So this interview that we do is intended for people to listen to find inspirational. So that's our goal. And by all means, if anybody has an interest to volunteer for SWS, we need your help as always with the different committees that we're involved with. So good morning, Swapan Paul, and I gave a brief intro for you. Is there anything you'd like to add to that intro about yourself and your background before I start with some questions? And we have about 30 minutes worth of questions, so we'll be talking for about the next half an hour.
Thanks, Roy. That's very nicely placed intro, very generous of you. And yes, I'm happy to have a chat with you about wetlands.
Okay. So the first question I want to start with is, how did you start your career in wetlands? And you know, that is just a general question, but some of my other questions was your path to wetland science direct path? Do you have stops along the way? So why don't you start with telling us how you began your career in wetland science?
Oh, that's a great question to start with. Roy, if you didn't know, I was born in a very tiny country. It's called Bangladesh, a South Asian tropical country. And where I was born was almost in and amongst wetlands. So there probably starts my science background in wetlands. But as a career, so I went to obtain my graduation in aquatic sciences and fisheries as an honors degree from not a mainstream university, but from an agricultural university. And at the time, there was only one agricultural university in Bangladesh, and it's called Bangladesh Agricultural University. Yes, and then I obtained my postgraduate degrees. And so soon after my initial degree, I was employed to understand the productivity, the biological productivity of a hydroelectric power generation lake, the largest lake in Bangladesh, the eastern part. So to try to understand its limnological and fisheries characteristics, is so that on one hand it serves its hydropower generation purpose. On the other hand, it also provides the much needed animal protein, fish protein, and other amenities. So my first employment and then science career, if you like, started with understanding the limnological situation of that large freshwater inland lake.
Okay, so this interview is about you, but hearing you talk about your early days, it's not unlike my upbringing here in the United States, in New Jersey, where I was born and raised. I was around water at the time. I didn't realize there were wetlands, but it was an area that I experienced and played in, investigated, went to college for, studied limnology, found that fascinating, found my pathway to wetlands and wetland science the way you have. So regarding pathways, another item that I wanted to discuss was, assuming your career was not in a straight line, and I know you've been at your current employment for a number of years, can you speak to any issues or hurdles that led to your existing occupation and tell us a little bit about your pathway? And again, this is relevant to somebody that might be inspired to now pursue wetlands. Hearing you talk about how you navigated to where you were and where you are now at your current position could be useful for others to hear. So the question, to rephrase it, is tell me about the path you took from where you were initially studying to where you are today, and what you're, some of the projects that you're working on today.
Thanks, Roy. Probably unlike many others, I must say that I had to embrace two pathways, not parallelly, one after another. So being an immigrant, of course, I had to start a new career, a new pathway. But my initial pathway was, as I've mentioned, in Bangladesh. And that was primarily to understand the massive inland sea during the monsoon season. So if you like to imagine the landscape of Bangladesh, where more than 70% of the land goes underwater during the monsoon season, and at the same time, with so many people in such a tiny place, there would always be a challenge how to feed these people. One movement, if you like, was how to attend to this malnourished population. So these inland seas during 7 months of the year, how it can be allowed to be very productive during that monsoon season. So there was this program called culture-based capture fisheries. And that's where my the second career started. And so one aspect of that was to produce millions and zillions of fish fingerlings, and mainly starting with carp, which is Cyprinus carpio.
Okay.
So, and trying to understand the reproductive biology of Cyprinus carpio, and then going through the production line of those haslings and fingerlings to that culture-based capture fisheries initiative. So when I immigrated to Bangladesh, from Bangladesh to Australia, and my initial job interviews would definitely include that glorious past of working on carp, how successful I was in carp breeding. And guess what? In this new land in Australia, carp was and still a no-no. It's an exotic species. It upsets the natural ecosystem balance, and it outcompetes with the native species. So at my interviews, whilst I would be talking and boasting of carp, on the other hand, I would see that everybody's faces go blank, and then you try to understand what's going wrong. And that's where I had to quickly turn around and try to put a positive twist to this. The carp story is that, well, yes, it's an opposite situation here, but my knowledge and understanding of carp biology, carp reproductive biology, carp breeding biology is going to come handy in controlling carp in Australia. So that's how, that's the kind of hurdles one is not prepared for, but people do have to face. And I had a really remarkable, this hurdle, and I've overcome it.
It
Yes.
sounds like quite the dichotomy, what you've experienced there.
It is. There's another dichotomy, if you like. So again, these migratory shorebirds, some of which you know, they travel tens of thousands of kilometers from the northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere during this feeding season. So a lot would migrate to Bangladesh, huge floodplains, huge feeding grounds. But the irony is that in those days, probably not much now, in those days, I'm talking of early 80s, mid 80s, people would capture those migratory shorebirds, and those would be prized animals. And that's a cruel thing, but it was a practice which was quite common in that landscape. So coming to Australia, and then one of the main tasks I was assigned was to look after migratory shorebird habitats and create new habitats, protect and conserve and enhance migratory shorebird habitats. And you can imagine that what a shocker that would be at the same time is that, hang on, what are we talking about? So that kind of dichotomy and then the contrasting situations is our wetlands are globally.
Understood. You are talking around the issue. I want to formulate a question, because when you and I prepared for this call today, you told me that you had made a choice that brought you, and again, I know you've kind of talked around this issue, but you made a choice that led you to Australia rather than go to Canada. Can you speak a little bit more about what that choice was and what precipitated the decision that got you to Australia versus going to Canada? And am I remembering that correctly, that there was a crossroads in your career and you chose not to go to Canada, you chose to go to Australia? Is that correct in my recollection?
That's correct. Good memory, Roy. So what it is after I've done my PhD and I was assigned with a large project in Bangladesh context, and that was funded by the World Bank and the UNDP. So I was in charge of the research component of that project, and then it was, again, I've indicated that about the floodplain ecosystem productivity, and then supporting the local population by helping these wetlands functioning in that way. So at some time came that I wanted to further excel in my understanding and knowledge of wetland science, wetland ecology, wetland ecosystem modeling, and I was looking for opportunities. So came the offer both from Canada and Australia. And I thought, born in a tropical country, Canada would be probably a bit too cold for me. So I opted for Australia, and I'm pleased that I made that choice.
No doubt. What was the approximate year that you made that decision not to go to Canada but to go to Australia?
Oh, in 1995 is when I we immigrated to Australia with my wife, who is also happens to be an academic.
Okay. And now I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your existing work that you have now, going on now, and what agencies or individuals or organizations are you currently cooperatively working with in your current project efforts?
Oh, that's a nice question, Roy. My current employer is a state government agency in the New South Wales state of Australia. And I have been in this agency the last 26 years. But I've been working with many other agencies and groups and organizations and individuals, and that's a sheer pleasure and privilege that I have been able to collaborate and partner with many other agencies and groups. So my main role here are two roles. One is place management, if you like, and place creation. And by place, I mean wetlands. So again, another really very glorious aspect of my involvement in wetlands is to fix problem wetlands, or to look after, to maintain and conserve problem wetlands, if you like. And when I say problem wetlands, mainly urban and peri-urban wetlands, which have happened to be highly intervened by people over decades and centuries, and those have been facing problems in terms of sustaining their ecological balance. So my main task is to rehabilitate, to restore some of the functions and systems around those wetlands. And the other aspect is to disseminate, share that knowledge and information with people of two dimensions. One is the public, just general public, and the other is actually wetland professionals. So that's a real opportunity I have, is on one hand, trying to fix those problem wetlands, generate information and then knowledge and experience, and be able to share that experience almost live with people who are interested in that aspect of wetland problems, prospects, and solutions. So in both of those areas, I have been working with others in partnership or collaboration.
Okay, so we are, SWS is global. We are a global community. Going back to, I'm in the East Coast of the United States on Friday afternoon. You're down under on the other side of the globe, Saturday morning in Australia. I want to try to get some perspective from you on two issues. First one is, in the state of New Jersey, I'm speaking locally about myself and our community here in New Jersey. A few decades ago, there was encouragement to do land reclamation, disregard wetlands. I don't know the exact date that started to change, but NJDEP, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, started to pivot about 30 years ago. And of course, today in New Jersey, we're highly urbanized, but touching a wetland today, of course, is taboo. You can't do that. So suppose my first question is, compare, contrast what I've just described about New Jersey and how the appreciation for wetlands really didn't come to be until about 2 or 3 decades ago versus where you are, where you've been working for almost 3 decades, and what changed, or when did it change in appreciation for wetlands? And this is by the state government. So scientists like you and myself and others in our SWS community, we've always had the appreciation for wetlands, but it is state government in New Jersey that really kind of developed this understanding after lots of pressure from people like us how vital wetlands are. So can you speak a little bit to Australia and historically when they started to appreciate the value of wetlands in reference to what I just described for New Jersey?
Absolutely. Roy, you have pinned it in terms of how we see wetlands as valuable, as important, as significant. And just 20, 30 years ago, we hardly knew what a wetland looks like. So, and that's you'll probably agree with me is that that's people. So I struggle to separate wetlands from people or people from wetlands. And that's why I say that the people's involvement and interaction with wetlands can be going either way. Either we destroy them or we create, protect, conserve, enhance them. And that's our story of the past, is that we didn't see wetlands as valuable, important. We saw those as swampy, yucky, smelly, muzzy sort of stuff. and now we realize that, hey, we are born actually on the perimeter of wetlands. Without wetlands, human civilization wouldn't probably start. You know, the first human being probably was born in around water somewhere, and our civilization established next to rivers and whatnot. So it's always people centric, and that's
Right.
where is my efforts go, is that how is us we perceive wetlands or things like of that nature, and then how we channel our efforts and our economic endeavors, our financial endeavors. Why I say this is that where I work, you mentioned about New Jersey, about how rapidly it's been urbanized, and then how probably that all came probably at the cost of destroying wetlands. It's natural, it's everywhere. It's not only New Jersey, all over the world. So wetlands are now considered not as wastelands anymore, and those are actually a jewel on the crown, because
Right.
this blue carbon agenda has brought forward shoreline wetlands, and which are mainly in urban area perimeters, into such a significant sort of level that we are now seeing or smelling money around wetlands. And that means, you know, offsetting how we can make use of these wetlands for blue carbon conservation or carbon offsetting. So you can see that is us as humans, is our way of thinking, and then how we see wetlands, and unfortunately or fortunately, whatever way you see it, is the money which is the driver in a lot of cases. Having said that, Roy, I would give lots of credits to Ramsar and SWS and similar international groups and bodies and organizations who have made a huge contribution to bringing about wetland to the limelight as it is today.
Indeed.
And SWS, you have mentioned SWS, I can see that how it's been more and more globalizing, and that's a real smart move to bring about more and more parties, more people to the party. And then we have a wetland champion event going globally at the same time.
Right. So another perspective I'd like to get from you is related to some buzzwords that we hear a lot now post some of these hurricanes in New Jersey and the eastern seaboard in the United States: resilience and sustainability, renewable, green, infrastructure. Those are all words that here in the East Coast of the United States those are, it's vogue to talk about resilience and sustainability. It wasn't that way 10 years ago. So down in Australia, when did the community down there start to embrace this idea of resiliency and sustainability the way we're now hearing it so much in American culture, in media, those kinds of words? And for that matter, in New York, if you're a company in New York, New Jersey, and you're involved with resiliency, or nobody wants to talk to you. So my question becomes, from your perspective, being in Australia on the other side of the globe, are those words new in your vernacular, or is that something that you've been engaged with for a period of time, as opposed to what I'm saying has happened here in the United States, where they're now more contemporary and, as I said, vogue expressions to use? It gets everybody's attention.
Well, that's a very topical point, Roy. Resiliency, sustainability. I mean, I put this way. So where is that balance that we are trying to strike? As I say, I try to put humans at the center of everything. In this case, wetlands. So it is us which make or break. Now we are talking of resiliency and then sustainability, which is primarily due to the fact that we have cooked our Mother Earth, if you like. So the global warming, the climate change, these half degrees. I mean, I talk to lots of people about climate change, if you like, global warming. And when I say it's half a degree or 2.5 degrees, everybody try to struggle that why it matters. When I hop in my car, I turn my air conditioner from nothing to quickly 23 degrees, they say that I am raising it by 20 degrees and you are talking of 2 degrees, what's your problem? And I say that we need to try to feel that what 2.5 degrees is or half a degree is. And that's what is cooking our earth, and that's what is giving us all these havocs. So how can we get out of this, come out of this is, in my view, is go back to our concept of tradition. In my view, technology is, of course, we have embraced and we'll have to sharpen our technology to move forward. But without bringing about traditional knowledge into technology, and without a really happy marriage between these two, we will be struggling to move forward. We're talking about resilience. To try to understand what a balanced resilience state would be, we need to go to the past, know the place better, and then how things used to perform in the past. So that's where comes tradition. I don't mean necessarily tradition means one particular clan or one particular cohort. No, it's we all have a history and past. How can we revisit, bring about those and blend these two to face our current? I mean, it's not a future problem, it's a current problem, that how we overcome these and face these, and then a look for a balanced earth, bit by bit, piece by piece, zone by zone, and then we have a livable earth.
So you raise an interesting point of contention, and this interview is about you, not me. A concern that I have is people seem to be focusing on temperature, change in temperature. Maybe that's because you look at numbers and somebody can understand single digit values and numbers and things of that sort. My concern, and you did say that we've cooked the planet, we've cooked Mother Earth, that leads to global warming and temperature, looking at temperature. My bigger concern that I don't hear much about in media is loss of species diversity. So in our community of wetland scientists, we use that. We talk about lack of diversity and loss of species diversity, species die off. But that's a bigger consequence to human impact to this planet that seems not to get media attention in this part of the world, at least. So this is, I'm making a statement, not really a question, but I'm going to ask your perspective on that as well. Is I wish people would focus more on loss of species diversity, because I think that has a greater impact than a change in temperature on the planet. So what's a new question, a new direction here in this interview? And we don't have too much more time, but I just wanted to get your feedback on that concern that I have, that I'm not hearing enough in media, enough in discussion among people, not scientists, about lack of species or loss of species diversity and Earth's current mass extinction that we're going through. What's your thought on that? And I'm saying that I don't see that it gets enough recognition. Do you agree, disagree, and what's your perspective on what I've just stated about my opinions on species diversity and being concerned with that more than a couple of degrees in temperature?
Well, that's another important point. I mean, in terms of the results and observations, I don't need to make up anything. We already have books and reports. I mean, you read. I refer to Professor Max Finlayson and Professor Roy Gardens. They edited those reports on how species have been lost in and from wetlands all around the world, and how we are losing wetlands. So that's one aspect. But in my view, again, the core of this problem is that how people have lost their deep connection with wetlands. And that's what the problem is. How can we reconnect ourselves to wetlands? And that's why the second aspect of my role here in Sydney Olympic Park Authority, my employer, is connecting wetlands with people. And as I've indicated, that who are those people? It is 4 million people who visit these parklands, wetland precinct in the heart of this big city, Sydney, which has only 5 million people. So 4 million visitations in and around wetlands, it gives that exposure to those wetlands and water bodies and then things happening there, and it self-educates them. So reconnecting, or the opportunity for people to go and see about and then appreciate a wetland, number one. Number two is that the professionals come and they got their training. That's another aspect. So what I would like to emphasize is that how we can, I will not say educate, how can make the awareness of the importance of wetlands and then relate that to our day-to-day livelihood activities, our living, our future, our safety, our security. Because, I mean, as I mentioned, I was born in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has the largest single stand of mangroves in the Bay of Bengal. And these mangroves, they take the initial shock of cyclones, dozens per year. And if those mangroves are not there, all that pressure would have to be handled by those huts and cottages next to the coast, and they would have no chances. No chances. So that's where comes the interaction and the connection and the relationship between humans and these humid places, the wetlands. How can we quickly reconnect and realize that connection? I think that's what is our biggest challenge.
Indeed. So we are at I think we're a little bit over our targeted time of 30 minutes, but our discussion is going so well, I wanted to continue it with some of the questions that we added on here. So I want to thank you again very much for getting up early on your Saturday morning and joining me on my Friday afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. I look forward to hearing this interview on YouTube, and I did mention that we do have some aspirations to make these podcasts in the future. So this will be posted to our SWS website, and hopefully in the future we'll make a podcast out of this. That's part of what our initiative is with the program that I'm involved with, the webinar committee that is doing these wetland interviews. So thank you so much for your generosity and your time. And if you have any closing thoughts, please feel free to share them.
I wanted to thank you, Roy, particularly for the dedication and the real passion that you show. And we have been working for quite some time now. But also, I must emphasize for our future wetland career-minded people is that, look, choose a role model, choose a mentor in your wetland career if you want to progress, because that's very important. If you ask me who's my mentor is Professor Max Finlayson, absolute champion.
Indeed, yeah.
Likewise, we all need to find a mentor. What it does is that it is like that guru and disciple relationship where the guru passes the concentrate of the experience and skills and tools and techniques to the next generation in a very, as I said, in a very concentrated way that saves us time who want to build our career. So this is very important for us. And the wetland sector is growing. It is becoming smarter. And we all need to be employing good science in studying and working around our wetlands. And for my future career enthusiast, please go along that line, and together we will be able to protect, conserve, and enhance our wetlands. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you. And that is an excellent point. And to that point about mentorship, the SWS Education Outreach Committee actually has a mentorship program, correct, that you're involved with?
Yes, it is. And I think it's going from strength to strength. And I think that's a very, very smart direction SWS is taking.
Yeah, so if somebody is interested to find a mentor in wetland studies, feel free to reach out to the SWS website. Very good. Thank you again. Your time is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Bye.